Every year, Black Friday is sold as the ultimate shopping holiday. Doorbuster deals, midnight openings, and crowds rushing for discounts that seem too good to pass up. But behind the excitement lies a disturbing truth. This day has a deadly history. When thousands of people pack into tight spaces with adrenaline pumping and tempers flaring, chaos can turn fatal within seconds. Today, we're looking at the 5 worst Black Friday deaths ever. Tragic moments where a simple trip to the store became a nightmare no family ever expected. It was just past dawn on November 28, 2008, at a Walmart in Valley Stream, New York. About 2,000 shoppers had gathered outside the doors, their eyes fixed on the deals waiting inside. High-definition televisions, digital cameras, DVDs, and electronics that promised the thrill of victory at bargain prices. What was meant to be a day of excitement, a tradition after Thanksgiving, was about to take a terrifying turn. Dimitai Jim Damour, a 34-year-old temporary employee, stood at the threshold, tasked with keeping order, unaware that he was about to face the unimaginable. As the doors opened, a surge of people rushed forward, a wave of desperation and impatience. In the blink of an eye, Damour was knocked to the ground, the crush of bodies pressing down on him. His shouts for help were drowned out by the roar of the crowd, people stepping over him, hands grasping for TVs and cameras as if their lives depended on it. Around him, chaos erupted. Fellow employees scrambled, trying to pull him from the crowd, only to be shoved and trampled themselves. Panic radiated like electricity through the masses. A woman, 8 months pregnant, was pushed and fell, her cries piercing the frantic roar. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital. The metal doors themselves bent and twisted under the force of the crowd, leaving jagged steel as a grim testament to the disaster. Witnesses described the shoppers as acting like savages, their single-minded fury eclipsing all sense of reason or humanity. Police arriving on the scene called it utter chaos. Security personnel, despite extra staffing and outside support, were powerless against the torrent of bodies. People shouted angrily when told the store was closing, some arguing that they had been waiting since Thursday morning, completely oblivious to the horror that had unfolded mere feet away. In that moment, the pursuit of bargains had completely eclipsed human empathy. The death of Damour sent shockwaves across the nation. News reports highlighted the senselessness of the tragedy, and public outrage followed. Lawsuits were filed, OSHA launched investigations, and the very culture of Black Friday shopping came under scrutiny. Walmart stated that it had attempted to prepare for the rush with additional staff, barricades, and coordination with local police, but the precautions had proved tragically insufficient. For Damour's family, the loss was incomprehensible. There was no warning, no chance to intervene, only the harsh reality that their loved one had been crushed under the weight of a crowd's impatience and greed. Friends and relatives were left grappling with the sudden void, wondering how a simple day of work could end in such horror. The incident became more than a news story. It was a cautionary tale. Black Friday, a day meant for celebration, had revealed a terrifying side of human behavior when fear, desire, and impatience collide. Damour's death was a stark reminder that life can be fragile, and that in moments of mass frenzy, one split second can erase everything, leaving devastation in its wake. Even years later, the image of that frenzied crowd, the bent metal doors, and the frantic rush for bargains lingers as a chilling warning. In the pursuit of material goods, humanity can sometimes vanish, leaving only tragedy behind. It was mid-morning on November 28, 2008, at a Toys R Us in Palm Desert, California. The store buzzed with the energy of Black Friday shoppers' families weaving through aisles, children pointing at toys with wide eyes, and carts piled high with gifts. Laughter, chatter, and the clatter of shopping carts filled the air, creating the familiar soundtrack of holiday anticipation. Yet, beneath the excitement, a storm was quietly brewing, one that would turn joy into terror in a matter of moments. Near the checkout, 2 women each accompanied by a man began a confrontation. At first, it was a flurry of punches, a typical argument escalating in frustration. Curious shoppers slowed to watch, unsure whether to intervene or turn away. Then, the situation escalated to something far darker. Juan Meza, 28, one of the men, suddenly pulled a gun from his pocket. The sound of a metallic click seemed to freeze time for a heartbeat. Panic rippled outward like a shockwave. Shoppers screamed, diving behind shelves, throwing themselves to the floor, clutching children tightly as fear replaced excitement. Alejandro Moreno, 39, the other man, drew his own weapon, and in a blur, the store became a battlefield. Gunfire rang out, echoing through aisles stocked with toys, video games, and electronics. The sounds of shots mixed with terrified screams and the pounding of hurried footsteps. Shoppers scattered, some hiding under display tables, others pressed against walls, hearts racing as they tried to make sense of the unfolding nightmare. Children cried, their parents desperately shielding them, praying the chaos would end. The two men chased each other through the store, weaving past shelves and counters as bullets ricocheted off walls. The once cheerful environment, filled with the promise of holiday joy, had been replaced by smoke of gunfire, shattered glass, and the cold reality of mortal danger. When the shooting finally ceased, both men lay lifeless near the front of the store, guns discarded at their sides, leaving a chilling stillness behind. The sound of footsteps and screams slowly faded, replaced by the stunned silence of shock. Witnesses struggled to process the horror. Joan Barrick, standing in line with her husband, remembered the terror vividly. "I was scared. I didn't want to die today. I really didn't want to die today, and I think that's what we were all thinking." Children had been caught in the line of fire, families trapped between shelves and gunfire, their innocence shattered in a moment that would replay in their minds forever. Authorities confirmed the shooting stemmed from a personal dispute between the individuals involved, rather than the frenzy of Black Friday itself. Yet, the timing and setting one of the busiest shopping days of the year, inside a store full of families, made the tragedy all the more shocking. Toys R Us officials expressed outrage and cooperated fully with law enforcement to unravel the events. But the trauma for those inside was irreversible. Even after calm returned, the memories lingered. The terrified faces of children pressed against the floor, the desperate shouts of parents, and the two men lying dead near the registers. The ordinary scene of holiday cheer had been transformed into a tableau of horror, a stark and unshakable reminder that violence can erupt anywhere, at any moment, even in a place meant for joy and celebration. The story of that day would haunt the community for years, a chilling example of how quickly life can be shattered when a single spark ignites into uncontrollable chaos. It was the early hours of Black Friday, November 25, 2016, outside Macy's at Hamilton Mall in Mays Landing, New Jersey. The night air was filled with a strange mixture of anticipation and tired excitement. Early shoppers wandered through the dimly lit parking lot, clutching coffee cups, checking their phones, and joking about who would grab the best deals. The hum of engines and quiet chatter gave the scene an ordinary rhythm, the kind of pre-dawn calm that precedes the storm. But in those few moments of quiet, no one could have predicted the horror about to erupt. Demond Cotman, just 21 years old, arrived with his older brother Shadi, 26. The two had planned to shop together before the day fully began, unaware that their night would end in tragedy. Without warning, gunfire shattered the early morning calm. The sound was sudden, sharp, and terrifying, echoing across the asphalt and the parked cars. Chaos erupted instantly. People screamed and dove behind vehicles, huddled with children, hearts hammering as panic swept through the crowd like wildfire. Demond was struck multiple times. He crumpled to the ground as fear and confusion rippled outward. His brother Shadi was hit in the leg, staggering but alive, caught in the middle of a nightmare no one could have prepared for. Witnesses later recalled the terror in the eyes of those around them. Shoppers pressed flat against car hoods, crouched behind mall columns, unsure whether to run or freeze. The parking lot, once a place of mundane errands, had become a battlefield. Bullet holes scarred the pavement and cars, a grim, jagged reminder of how fast life could unravel. Demond's death was not just a statistic, it was the abrupt extinguishing of a bright, promising life. A standout football player and runner at Atlantic City High School, he had recently become a father and was carving out a future as an electrical apprentice. He had served his country in the U.S. Air National Guard, graduating from basic training in 2014, a young man of ambition and responsibility. That night, all of those hopes, all of those plans were violently stolen in an instant, leaving a family and community in incomprehensible grief. Shadi, though wounded, survived, but the emotional scars would linger long after the physical injuries healed. For witnesses and shoppers who had narrowly escaped, the image of Demond on the pavement and the echoes of gunfire were etched permanently into memory. Families had come expecting bargains, perhaps a few early holiday gifts, but instead, they were thrust into the terrifying reality that violence could strike anywhere, even in the supposed safety of a crowded mall parking lot. It would take years for justice to move forward. 3 men were eventually charged in connection with Demon's murder: Stephen Martinez, Timothy Davis, and Malik Boone. But one remained a fugitive, leaving questions about motive and accountability hanging in the air. For the Cotman family, every detail of that night, the sound of gunshots, the scramble of terrified shoppers, the silence that followed the chaos remained vivid, a haunting reminder of how quickly life can shift from ordinary to unimaginable. Black Friday, a day that should have been about deals and celebration, instead became a stark lesson in fragility. Demond Cotman's death was a chilling reminder that even in the midst of normal routines, violence can erupt, leaving lives forever changed and communities struggling to make sense of senseless tragedy. For those who witnessed it, and for those who loved him, the echoes of that night will never fade, a permanent scar on a day meant for joy. It was Black Friday, November 28, 2014, and the bustling Magnificent Mile in Chicago was alive with the chaos and excitement of holiday shoppers. Inside Nordstrom, seasonal employee Nadia Ezaldane was marking her 22nd birthday, juggling customers and displays, unaware that the day would end in unspeakable tragedy. Her ex-boyfriend, Marcus D., 31, had been stalking and harassing her for months after their breakup. Despite attempts to seek help, including court filings and requests for protective orders, the threat he posed remained largely unchecked. That evening, Dee entered the crowded store and confronted Nadia. In a split second, gunfire erupted. Nadia was shot on the store's first floor, while shoppers screamed and scrambled for cover. Chaos and fear rippled through the crowded department store. Families ducked behind racks, children clung to their parents, and the sounds of terror echoed against the polished floors and glass displays. When police arrived, Dee had taken his own life. Nadia was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, clinging to life, but despite doctors' efforts, she passed away the following day. A bright young life, full of potential and promise, had been violently cut short. Nadia's story was not just another headline. It was a harrowing example of how domestic violence can follow its victims into spaces that should be safe, including workplaces. Friends and family described her as inspiring, intelligent, and full of hope. Her brother, Harib, recalled the crushing grief that gripped their family. A celebration turned nightmare, a birthday overshadowed by a senseless act of violence. The aftermath raised painful questions. Could her death have been prevented if her employer had known about the threat? Could stronger protective measures have stopped Dee before he pulled the trigger? Experts and advocates highlighted the chilling reality that abusers often track their victims to their workplaces, exploiting gaps in security and awareness. Nordstrom, reeling from the tragedy, closed the store the following day and brought in grief counselors for employees traumatized by the events. The shopping district, usually a place of holiday joy and excitement, had been transformed into a scene of horror. For those who witnessed the shooting, the memory of that night, the panic, the screams, the desperate scramble to safety would never fade. Nadia Ezaldine's death was a stark reminder that even in the most ordinary and public spaces, danger can lurk close to home. Black Friday, a day meant for celebration and deals, became a day marked by fear, grief, and the tragic loss of a young woman whose life was stolen far too soon. It was late afternoon on Thanksgiving weekend, November 25, 2016, and the Walmart parking lot in northwest San Antonio was alive with the usual Black Friday chaos. Cars honked as drivers jockeyed for spaces. Shoppers weaved through the crowd carrying armfuls of bags, and children clutched their parents' hands tightly, eyes wide with excitement and fatigue. Among the throng was Isidro Zarate, a 39-year-old father and husband who had just watched his wife disappear into the store to start her holiday shopping. The crisp air was filled with the sounds of commerce, laughter, and the clatter of shopping carts, but that ordinary rhythm was about to be shattered. Across the lot, a violent struggle caught Isidro's eye. A man had grabbed a woman by the hair and was striking her relentlessly as stunned onlookers froze, unsure whether to step in or flee. Instinct and courage propelled Isidro forward. Without hesitation, he moved into the chaos, placing himself between the attacker and the victim. In that moment, he wasn't thinking about bargains, Black Friday lines, or his own safety. He was acting purely to protect another human being, but the courage he displayed would cost him everything. The assailant, 21-year-old Teles Juarez, suddenly drew a gun. The sound of gunfire cracked through the parking lot, sharp and terrifying. Bullets tore through the air, striking Isidro as he tried to shield the woman, ending his life in an instant. She managed to escape, scrambling into the safety of the crowd, but others were not so fortunate. Shrapnel from the gunfire hit a woman in a nearby car, and dozens of shoppers looked on in disbelief, some frozen in shock, others diving for cover, hearts hammering in their chests. The chaos turned a space meant for holiday joy into a scene of horror and panic. By the time authorities arrived, Isidro had already been killed. The Walmart parking lot, normally filled with the clamor of bargain hunters, now echoed with the stunned silence of tragedy. Witnesses recounted the terror, the suddenness of the violence, the bravery of a man who had stepped in when most would have hesitated. For family and friends, the pain was unbearable. A loving father, husband and protector, gone in the blink of an eye. A man whose only crime was doing the right thing. In the weeks and months that followed, justice moved, but it could never restore the life that had been lost. Teles Juarez pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to life in prison for killing Isidro, and he received an additional 20-year sentence for the assault of another woman who had tried to call 911 during the shooting. Legal consequences may have been delivered, but the memory of that day, the fear, the bravery, the senseless loss remained etched in the minds of all who witnessed it. Isidro's death became a haunting example of how quickly ordinary moments can spiral into catastrophe. What should have been a day of gratitude and togetherness became a day marked by violence, shock, and grief. His courage, selflessness, and ultimate sacrifice serve as a sobering reminder that heroism often comes at the highest cost, and that even amidst the frenzy of holiday shopping, the fragility of life can never be taken for granted. For those who knew him, and for the community that witnessed his final act of bravery, Isidro Zarate's memory endures a beacon of courage and a painful emblem of a life stolen too soon.